The air in the boardroom tasted like recycled ego and cheap dry cleaning chemicals. Corporate air has a flavor if you know how to notice it, part ozone, part burnt coffee, part fear that's been scrubbed off with disinfectant and pumped back through the vents. It was exactly 72 degrees. Because I was the one who calibrated the VAV boxes in the ceiling plenum 2 months ago after accounting complained about draft anxiety. But judging by the sweat gathering on Brad's upper lip, you'd think we were in a Bikram yoga studio. Brad, Vice President of Strategic Synergies, or whatever focus grouped nonsense they'd printed on his business cards this week, was standing at the head of the mahogany table, not sitting, standing. He liked to stand when he talked because he thought it made him look decisive. What it actually did was make him look like a man vibrating at the exact frequency of cocaine energy and unearned confidence that usually precedes a company-wide apology email. He was gesturing aggressively at a pie chart projected onto the wall, the kind of chart that looks impressive until you realize the labels don't add up to 100%. The colors were garish, neon blue, aggressive orange, a visual scream. I was near the door, half turned away, checking the load balance on the south wing's electrical grid on my tablet. One transformer had been running hot all morning, and I was trying to decide whether to derate it now or wait until after the investors left. I was minding my own business, being invisible, something I'd gotten very good at over the years. That's when his voice cracked across the room like a whip made of insecure masculinity. Refill the toner, secretary. Not my name. Not even, hey, you. Just a job title he'd invented for me. He didn't bother looking in my direction. He snapped his fingers instead, still pointing at the screen. And fetch me water, sparkling, not the tap garbage. The words landed and just hung there. The room went quiet in that very specific way that precedes mechanical failure. The silence before a boiler blows a safety valve. The silence where everyone present suddenly becomes intensely interested in the grain pattern of the table. Around him sat the other executives, gray suits, beige personalities, men who wore approachable smiles and never remembered the names of the people who cleaned up after them. They shifted in their ergonomic Herman Miller chairs, knees knocking under the table, eyes sliding everywhere except toward me. They knew. They knew I wasn't a secretary. They knew I wasn't admin. They knew I was the facilities controller, the person who signed off on every maintenance contract, who carried the keys to every restricted door, who had the master override for the elevators, the fire suppression system, and the security lockdown. But Brad didn't know. Brad was new. Brad was a transfer from the Chicago branch, a man who thought infrastructure was just a buzzword you slapped into a PowerPoint slide. A man who believed buildings cleaned themselves and stayed standing through the sheer force of leadership. I didn't move. I just stared at the back of his head. He had one of those expensive haircuts that's meant to look effortless but costs $300 and an NDA, the kind that says, I cheat on my taxes and my wife, but I drive a Tesla, so we're calling it balance. Did you hear me? He finally turned around, annoyed, eyes bright and slightly unfocused. Too much confidence, too little sleep. Toner, water, now, he snapped. We've got the Japanese investors here in 20 minutes, and this report looks like it was printed in a cave. I glanced down at my ID badge, clipped to my belt beside my master key ring and my multi-tool, clear as day. Brenda Vance, Director of Facilities. But to Brad, a woman over 40 who wasn't wearing a blazer with shoulder pads was just part of the furniture. A movable asset, a human appliance. The printer is network managed. Brad, I said calmly, too calmly, it's not out of toner. You're trying to print A3 onto letter-size paper. It's a formatting issue, user error, specifically, your error. He blinked. You could almost hear the Windows error noise behind his eyes. For half a second, his brain attempted to process the information. Then it slammed directly into the reinforced firewall of his narcissism and bounced right back out. I don't care about the technicalities, he snapped. Just fix it. Get the water. God, do I have to do everything myself? Something twitched under my left eye. That was the moment. The fork in the road. I could have corrected him, pulled rank, explained that I was actually there to inspect the structural integrity of the window seals after the last storm. I could have embarrassed him publicly, watched him stutter and backpedal. But then I looked at the chair he was guarding. The power seat, the head of the table. And something else clicked into place. You see, if you're enjoying watching a man dig his own grave with a golden shovel, you don't interrupt him mid-swing. You step back and let him dig deeper. So I didn't correct him. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It didn't reach my eyes. It was the kind of smile a waitress gives you right before she spits in your soup and brings it out steaming. Fine, I said softly. I'll get your water, Brad. Sparkling. Relief flickered across his face. Not gratitude, relief. The relief of a man reassured that the hierarchy was intact. I turned and walked out of the boardroom. The heavy glass door hissed shut behind me, sealing in the smell of his desperation and cheap cologne. I didn't go to the break room. I walked past it, down the hall, to the janitor's closet, the one with the crooked door and the flickering fluorescent light. I stepped inside and locked it behind me. Behind the mop sink was the service panel. Most people thought it was just pipes. It wasn't. I opened it and felt the building hum around me. My heart was pounding, but not fast, slow, deliberate, like a machine coming online. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is unstable fuel. It burns hot and fast and leaves nothing useful behind. This was colder than that. This was calculated. This building was my organism. I knew every vibration in its bones, every rattle in its lungs. I had kept it alive through blackouts, blizzards, budget cuts, and 3 different CEOs who thought preventative maintenance was optional. And this parasite in a tailored suit thought he could bark orders at the immune system. I pulled out my tablet, the industrial one, scarred and heavy, not the glass toys the sales team used to play Candy Crush in meetings. Floor schematics loaded instantly. Room 404, Boardroom B. Occupant, Bradley Miller. Environmental controls, current set point, 72 degrees. I thought about his request for sparkling water. I thought about the timeline, the investors, the performance. You want water, Brad? I murmured to the low electrical hum of the building. I'll give you a flood, but not today. No. Today, I would play the long game. I would let him sit in that chair. Let him feel powerful, because the higher a man climbs on borrowed authority, the farther he falls when gravity remembers him. And I controlled gravity in this building. I tapped the screen and lowered the boardroom temperature by exactly 3 degrees. Not enough to trigger an alert, not enough for anyone to complain officially, just enough to make his confidence shrink and his body betray him. Subtlety is the key to psychological warfare. And Brad had no idea the war had already started. Sarah, honey, he can't fire me, I said into the phone, keeping my voice low as I watched security escort a group of contractors out of the lobby. He doesn't even know what I actually do. He thinks I'm the janitor. I leaned against the cold marble wall, listening to her breathe on the other end. But when the dust settles, I continued, calm as a metronome, he's going to find out that I'm the one holding the broom and the trash bag. I ended the call and turned toward the freight elevator. The executive elevators were glass and chrome, designed to make people feel important as they ascended. The freight elevator was something else entirely. It was steel and scars, dented walls, chipped paint, the faint smell of oil and ozone. A machine built to carry weight, not ego. I pressed the button with authority. The doors groaned open. As I stepped inside, I heard a voice behind me. You couldn't stop him. It was barely louder than the hum of the building. A young coder, early 20s, badge still stiff and new. He looked like someone who still believed the system worked if you followed the rules. I didn't answer right away. The doors stayed open as I turned and looked back at the wreckage of the 12th floor. Empty cubicles, power cords dangling like exposed nerves. A ghost town created by a man who thought spreadsheets mattered more than people. He's not wrong, I said finally. I can't stop him. The coder swallowed. But gravity can. I stepped backward into the elevator. I'm about to cut the elevator cable. The doors closed, sealing me inside with the low mechanical growl of descent. Most people don't know about the interstitial void. It's the space nobody budgets for and nobody advertises, the dead zone between the drop ceiling of the 45th floor and the concrete slab of the roof. Too tight to stand in, too ugly to acknowledge. It exists purely out of necessity. It's packed with fiberglass insulation that makes your skin itch for 3 days if you so much as brush against it. Rat traps left behind by an administration that preferred poison over responsibility. High-velocity air ducts that scream when the system ramps up, carrying secrets as easily as air. It's also the most acoustically perfect place in the entire skyscraper if you want to hear what's happening in the executive penthouse suite without being seen. Officially, I was up there to inspect the damper actuators. Unofficially, I was flat on my stomach in the dust, breathing through a mask, my elbows digging into steel runners as I listened. Brad's office sat directly below me. The vent grill above his desk was loose. I'd loosened it myself with a dime an hour earlier. Yeah, bro, it's a done deal. Brad's voice floated up through the ductwork, tinny, distant, but unmistakable. I closed my eyes. I'm gutting the vendor list, all of them, cleaning, security, maintenance. We're terminating the current contracts effective the 1st of the month. My heart slammed into my ribs. My contracts. My people. Maria, who scrubbed the executive bathrooms at dawn and never complained, even though her hands were cracked raw from chemicals. 3 kids in college, 2 jobs, 1 bad month away from disaster. Mike, who worked security nights and brought his own coffee because the machines were always broken. The guy who knew which doors stuck in winter and which alarms glitched when the humidity rose. The HVAC contractors who knew the building by feel, who could tell you a bearing was going bad just by listening to the vibration through their boots. All of them. Gone. Who am I bringing in? Brad asked. There was a pause, then laughter. It was a wet sound, a laugh without joy. Apex Solutions, yeah, the LLC you set up in Delaware. Look, nobody checks vendor background. I sign the PO. You invoice us for 20% over market. We split the difference. It's free money, Chad. My fingers curled into fists against the steel. I'm telling you, Brad continued, smug now. This building is a cash cow. Nobody's milking it. I froze. This wasn't arrogance. This was theft. He wasn't just incompetent, he was embezzling. He was planning to fire my team, my family, to launder money through a frat buddy with a mailbox in Delaware. What about the current facilities director? Chad asked. Brad scoffed. Who, Brenda? The gargoyle in the basement? He laughed again. Please, she's a glorified super. I'll demote her to night shift or make her life so miserable she quits. She doesn't have the spine to fight back. A pause. She's just staff. Another pause. She's just staff. I lay there in the dark, dust clinging to my clothes, breathing slow and steady. Then I began to crawl backward. Carefully, silently. My knees scraped against concrete runners, fiberglass bit through my sleeves, my lungs burned with dust and something hotter. By the time I dropped back into the service corridor, I wasn't shaking. I didn't just have a smoking gun. I had the bullet, the casing, and the receipt for the gunpowder. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a vinyl booth at Lou's Diner across town. It was the kind of place where the menu was sticky, the napkins were too thin, and the coffee tasted like battery acid filtered through regret. Perfect. Across from me sat Saul. Saul looked like a bullfrog stuffed into a suit 2 sizes too small. His tie was crooked, his knuckles were thick. He ate fries like a man who had made peace with cholesterol. He was the shark I'd told Sarah about. So, Saul said, drowning a fry in ketchup, let me get this straight. You want to buy the building? No, I said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. I don't have the capital to buy a high-rise. Saul, I'm a facilities manager, not Elon Musk. He raised an eyebrow. I want to buy the contracts. He opened the envelope. Papers rustled. His eyes moved fast. Master Facilities Agreement, he murmured. The one Brad's trying to terminate. Read the fine print, I said, taking a sip of coffee that could strip paint. Page 50, Clause 12b. He squinted. Right of first refusal, vendor continuity protocol. His mouth slowed. It says if the building ownership attempts to terminate critical infrastructure services without cause, the current bond-holding service provider can assume control of the operational LLC to prevent catastrophic failure. Exactly, I said. Brad wants to replace core vendors with an unlicensed shell company. 0 credit history. 0 insurance. 0 staff. Saul looked up. That's catastrophic risk. And who is the current bond-holding service provider? He asked. I smiled. It wasn't friendly. Me. Well, Titan Infrastructure Group, an LLC I formed 10 years ago to handle liability insurance for the HVAC upgrades. He choked on a fry. You own the company that keeps the building alive? I own the guts, Saul, I said quietly. The owners just rent the skin. I leaned forward. I want you to exercise that clause. I want a hostile takeover of the facilities contract. Locked down so tight even God himself couldn't change a light bulb without my signature. This won't be cheap, Saul warned. Brad will fight it. No, I said, reaching into my pocket and setting a USB drive between us. Brad won't. Saul stared at it. Because Brad is currently soliciting kickbacks from a shell company in Delaware, I continued, and if he fights me, this goes to the SEC, the IRS, and his wife. I paused. In that order. Saul leaned back. A slow grin spread across his face. Brenda, he said, impressed now. I thought you were just the lady who fixed my AC that one time. I am, I said, standing and tossing a 20 on the table. And right now, I added, the AC is set to deep freeze.